Hey, everybody, this is Brent from The Second Look, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with composer Barry Neely. Barry, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Well, good to meet you too.
Was watching some of your clips and reels and things, very interested and curious about your process. I want to get into some specifics like how you work and how you make some of the decisions you make, that kind of thing. But
Okay.
I always want to start with the beginning. So, was it music first and then film, or the other way around for you?
Yeah, it was definitely music first. From a very young age, recorder, which they forced us to play,
Mm,
and I was forced to practice and then turned to loving it. And then to piano, and then to bass, then to playing into bands in high school, and then to quitting piano lessons, but still playing the piano on my own at home after school, just
mm,
messing around.
okay.
I couldn't be bound by the structure of lessons.
Okay.
So it was like just let me make stuff, which might kind of be my film music career motto. Just let me do it.
You're right, right. So
So yeah,
mostly self-taught.
yeah. Well, in terms of composition, it was playing in bands and then writing songs for those bands. And like I played in a band in high school that was created by this guy's father, and it was called Generation Gap because the father was like a former musician,
Mm,
and he brought his sons into play, and it was full horn, 8-piece band, 9-piece band.
wow.
So I started writing originals for them. I did a couple. Anyways, point being is it was fun playing in the band, but that's where I kind of learned how to arrange horns. We didn't necessarily play my tunes yet because I was 15 years old. So I don't blame them. But that's where I learned about song structure and harmonization, and then for playing through with the piano at home that's when I learned that I kind of had a knack for structure, but not like pop song structure. Like
Yeah.
I was a progressive rock fan, and I still am,
Okay.
but that's just longer pieces, and then that kind
Yeah.
of translated really well into film. So when I got into college and started learning music recording and meeting filmmakers, that's kind of when I started.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay. Great. So it's been just lots of years grinding, learning by doing, and then building up your career from there. So what maybe was there something about being a musician and playing in bands, or then going into film? Like, how did that? I mean, maybe you do both, but if your career path is leading you towards composing,
Mm.
what was that decision like?
I don't like playing in bands. It's maybe it's not as simple as that. It's I either want to be in charge or not in charge at all.
Okay.
So bass guitar, electric bass is like my main instrument. So so for instance, I went to South by Southwest with a band back in 2011, and it was their songs. And I was like, great, I will play for you. That's what you want. Great. When I was in bands, it was like, I want to write the song. No, 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 I don't want you to do that. I need you to do this because of this reason.
Hmm.
And so it was clear to me um, that writing with other people wasn't really what I wanted to do.
Mm.
So film music was like, you got to work with the director, you got to work with producers, but you're writing it. And
Yeah.
so I kind of strayed away from doing bands unless I'm like, just tell me what to do. You know,
Right. That
Give me
makes
your
sense.
charts. I'll play your charts
Yeah.
because I don't want to seem like I'm not a team player. I just know my strengths and know what I want to do.
Sure. Sure. And yeah, that seems like a logical choice. And yeah, you're right. Like film music is starts with you and ends with you almost like, but with the director's input. But yeah, you're set loose after that, and you have a lot of freedom there. Curious, how does I guess following that, working with a director? This is something I'm always curious about between directors and composers because maybe chances are directors might not be as musically inclined
Mm.
or they might not speak that language very fluently. So what's it like working with a director who can't really articulate in musical terms what they're looking for?
You have to have patience, and it's
Mm,
almost like a little bit of a working with a director who doesn't understand music is like almost fearful that they don't understand music,
mm,
and they're afraid of the process. So you really have to just have patience, and every director is different. And by the way, to be perfectly honest, sometimes it's not the director you're composing for, sometimes it's the producer.
mm, mhm.
Like you also have to figure out who you're composing for.
Yeah, yeah.
because I've been on projects where the director's not in charge,
Right.
you
That's a
know?
good
And
point.
so, like, who's really green lighting the cues that you make?
Mm,
So, it's I emphasize with the director or whomever, the director that me translating what you're saying and what you want is my job. So don't so when I'm talking with the director, I'm writing down every word, almost every word they say,
yeah.
because I will keep a text file and I'll be stuck on a cue and I'll just look and just be like, "Oh, off. Everything needs to be off." Because this was a horror film. And so it was like, "Okay, no, this cue is too like the reason they're not liking the cue is because it sounds too harmonious.
Mm,
So I need to mess this one up. I need to make it sound disharmonious or unharmonious, whatever you want to say." And so it was this text file that I done by my initial conversations that guided me to make
mm,
that cue better. And so that was a big help. So just having the director know that whatever they say, no matter how they say it, they sometimes probably wrote the script, they probably worked on the script. They can articulate things.
mhm,
Just because it's not music doesn't mean you can't translate it.
mm. Right, right. No, it's a great point about taking notes for the composers out there. Taking
Mhm,
notes
mhm.
as much as possible, having multiple conversations. Is there a process of like really rough drafting things and then letting that be the next layer in the conversation?
Yeah, so I will talk with the director and ask them what their movie's about and have them explain it to me in their own words
Mm,
because that's important. It's kind of like, and that was a technique picked out from Hans Zimmer. He's like, don't send me a script because I don't really get scripts.
mhm,
It's not it's like similar to a director not getting music. It's like I can read a script and be like, cool, but I'm not like, oh, I get it. And
right.
so I want the director to tell me what it's about or what this scene is about because then they're like their passion or their even just what words they use will help me understand it way better on an emotional sense.
Mhm,
And then they might send me. I used to be fearful of temp music where they would put in, something that they found, but I now use that as a guide because it's like, especially in indie film where the budget is smaller, the timeline is usually smaller. It's like, just give me everything and let me figure it out.
mhm,
And then I always say I'm gonna create 3 themes, maybe 90 seconds long. And I just come up based upon my conversations and the information I've gathered. I come up with 3 themes. Usually what it is it's 2 themes because writing music is difficult. And
mhm,
so I write 2 themes and then I'll like make a variation on one of the themes that, say it's like one's made with strings and then this variation is actually the same thing but in piano,
mm,
more piano oriented. So that because I learned way back in the day that if you only present one theme, the answer could easily be, that's not right. And then the conversation is kind of dead.
yeah,
And then it's like, okay, let me write again. It's like, if you have 2 and maybe 3, oh, it's actually closer to here than it is to this. So let's go with this way. I was like, okay, great. So now you've at least
mm,
started a path.
mhm, yeah,
And that's how it is. So yeah, there's a little bit of upfront work.
yeah, right. No, I like that the comparison process because one thing is it's either yes or no. There's no gray area.
Yeah.
It's like you put 2 things up and now you have some sort of parameters and that's a good way to
I would
guide.
say it's like, yeah, it's like working. It's like listening in mono and listening in stereo. It's like I don't know. It's just there's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
about having 2 that just expands the horizon of the conversation like exponentially.
Right, right. No, that's great. You were talking about temp music. You typically use other composers' temp music, your own, depending on the project?
Well, it's the director that brings that in.
Okay, they start with their temp music.
They start with their time music. And again, I used to be like really mad because I get it. There is a point at which people are so drawn to temp music that they can't let it go.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and I always use vague examples, so you can't point to the project, but on, a particular project, the producer just loved the temp music in there. And no matter what I wrote, it wasn't going to be good enough. And they told me that. At least they told me that. And I tried. And if I didn't try, I would be upset with myself.
Mhm.
But they were like, there's nothing you're going to write that's going to make me not like. And so in that case, it's dangerous. But I would rather trust the filmmaker that if they bring in a piece of temp music or a score that they like, that they're not going to be like, I want this score,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Way back in the day when, like a first time filmmaker, I had a friend who I was trying to compose for, and he brought in this, this Hans Zimmer piece from The Thin Red Line. It's a massive orchestra sound. And this was like a long time ago, maybe 2010. And, string sounds, fake string sound. I don't have access to an orchestra. Let's get that clear. I mean, I do if there's a budget or,
Right, right.
but so I wrote this piece that sounded pretty darn good to me, but he's like, well, it doesn't really sound the same. And you're like, well, no, I don't, I don't have Hans Zimmer's orchestra, you
Right.
know? So it is fine because it was a short film, but it was maybe that was a lesson in like, yeah, that was a lesson, and he wasn't going to accept anything else because he
Mhm.
already kind of created the project based upon that temp music.
Right.
and so it's fine, but it's like that was a learning experience of like, okay, sometimes they're just not gonna budge no
Yeah.
matter
Right.
how quality you write. But nowadays, if I trust the director, I'm gonna be like, okay, let me figure out what they like about the music that they're using, and then I'll use that.
Mm.
Because even if it's a conversation of like, i like I don't like piano, and so all their temp music has no piano. It's like it's more string oriented, it's more electronica oriented, and then it's like, okay, great, well, at least I know, again, somewhere to get to
Yeah.
that road of you starting to write music
Right.
always helps.
Yeah, any clue.
Any clue?
Well, yeah, that okay, I wanted to ask you about instrument choice
Okay.
because I was, again, watching some of your reels and things, and you're clearly, I mean, in some cases, you're not even using instruments. You're using, I saw a coffee cup, you know?
Yep.
So, what's that process like, deciding what instrument to use for a composition that may or may not be, out of the box?
So if you're trying to write something that sounds original, if you start with a coffee cup, you're already eliminating 99.9999% of music. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
right,
so why not use that? I'm very rhythmic oriented. And what is percussion but hitting anything that makes a cool sound?
right.
And so if you're trying to figure out originality, then just use something that hasn't been used. You know, it's not uncommon for composers to use weird objects. So just
Mhm,
start with that.
mhm,
Only a couple times have I created like an entire score based upon fake stuff. But, like one was a soda can. I was flipping the tab and just
mm,
kind of tapping it and was like, why not start with that? That's a cool
right,
sound.
right.
Now that movie, that short film had to do with a guy fighting automatic sinks in a restroom. And so already you're dealing with like, let's explore that. Let's go to metals, you're talking about plumbing. So use metallic things, like make it like draw the direct line. Why go around and you're like, well, conceptually it's really, and it's like, no, 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 it's about plumbing. Like use that, you know, you're not,
Right,
so that's usually where I start. When you talk in terms of more traditional instrumentation, that's usually born from conversations with the director. Like, I like violins. People love cellos. They love cellos, and so I'll start with a cello. Give them what they want
right,
and see
right.
what you can come up with.
So, yeah, I love the idea that to create an original sound, to use something that you've never heard before, starting with, um, the originality starts with the instrument choice,
Yeah.
and I love how simple that is as an idea, um, and it's interesting because I'm thinking about it, like, there's not many other arts that can do that, like, a screenwriter, you can't use a, different language or, or something, or you can't, as a painter, maybe, you can't use different, well, maybe that's a bad example because you can use crayons or you can use, other, I
Well,
guess
I mean,
I
it's a
guess.
comparison, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah, my
but,
my brother's actually my brother's an art historian in New York, and it's funny because I remember hearing him complain back in the day about I never meet a painter that uses paint anymore. And he's like, they always feel like they got to use blood or like this or that. Like, and it's like, oh, that is an option, because when
Right,
you're not in that world, you don't consider the outside the box options. You don't
right.
think of them because you're not in charge of branching out creatively in a medium you don't know.
Mhm.
So yeah, there are comparisons.
Yeah, that's no, that's great, and I like the idea of pairing the right instrument, the next step. You've chosen to go the whatever, the more specific route or whatever. Choosing an instrument for a specific character or a
Mhm.
specific mood that you're going for. Can you like what's that process like? Is there an audition? You try different instruments and to see if it clicks with that scene, that character, whatnot?
Yeah, and I will cite a very specific example, but another short film I worked on where I wrote. Well, okay, to back up, I wrote 3 separate themes, this time with 3 unique themes,
Mm,
and they were all rejected.
mm.
And the only note I got was, "See what else you can come up with." And I've been crushed before, but I've never been so crushed then.
Mm,
So, because so you're pretty much it's like redo it, but with no information, with no new information.
yeah, that's tough.
So then it turned into I could get the feeling that they wanted simpler. So I went very simple, and I went with, like, 2 instruments. This other one had, like, 3 or 4 and, had a lot
Mhm,
of rhythm going on and okay, simple. Okay, great. At least I got the note back, this is definitely in the right direction, but there was something off, and it got to the point where the director liked it, but the producer wasn't completely into it, but she knew that it was she could see the potential in it.
mhm,
So what I did was I wrote 7 different versions of that one version with different instruments
mm,
because you would love to say, and I heard them say this and I found the perfect instrument right away. Would love
right,
to say that.
right.
But in this case, I had to write cello and piano, piano and violin, piano and like, I don't know. It was like 7 different combinations. It turns out that the producer just doesn't like piano and doesn't think piano fits with the character,
Mm,
but the flute does. And it's funny that she said the flute because I put in that flute of like, I just feel like I hear a couple flute notes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
she just, and so the flute wasn't even a main part of the theme because
Mm,
again, it was only a 2 instrument thing. So it was like, I guess it was 3 instruments, 2 instruments and flute. And she was like, that's the flute. It's the flute. The flute is that character. And I'm like, okay, I can absolutely do that. So
right.
there was no other way to figure out how to proceed other than just give them 7 versions
Yeah,
of the
right.
same melody. Like, I don't even think I mean, you gotta change the range a little bit in terms of
Mhm,
octaves, but, like, I'm pretty sure it was just note for note. I just put
yeah,
the MIDI track into a flute and and maybe
yeah,
buttered it up a little bit. So, it was great, though, and she, to this day, loves it and boasts about that
yeah,
score and said, like, "That's the feeling of loneliness I wanted." And I'm like, "Awesome. I don't know how
yeah.
we got there, but we got there."
Wow, yeah. As long as you get
And th
there.
and that's the patience
Mm,
that I won't lie, I don't really have. And what I mean is what I mean by that is no one knows but inside me that I don't have patience.
yeah.
And I don't mean patience as in anger, I mean patience as in, like, I wanna get this right, but I'm not getting it right. It hurts me musically, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
It's
it's
hard
having patience with yourself more so.
that's a good point. Yeah, because, eh, I imagine I'm a half-time musician myself. I had the band thing myself in high school and stuff.
Nice.
But, I know that you bring a song into the group, and you show it to them, and if you don't get the response you're looking for, it can be, yeah, kind of like a little tiny knife, in the back. And so it's very, I think there's with any creative art, right? Any creative collaborative art, you're gonna you have to have a tough skin. You have
Mm,
to be able to present something, receive feedback, not take it personal,
yeah,
that kind of thing. That's another skill, right? That you have to
yeah.
really hone in to be able to handle situations like that.
I
Um,
did a film where I handed in the music and they use some of the music in other parts of the movie, and you give them stems, so you give them different, groups of instruments. That's supposed to be so you can lower or certain instruments, not take them out. But in a couple instances, they took out a couple instruments, and I was crushed. And I wrote my friend, who is also a composer, Ronen Landa, and I was like, "Oh, they did this," and he goes, "That happens every time. Like you give them." And for some reason, I just hadn't really. It was like the experience prior to that was a great musical experience,
mm,
and so I was like, "Well, they when they like what I write, they use it." And Ronan was like, "No, no, no. Your job is actually more to take notes and
mm,
to address notes. Like, and then some of that is in terms of when I create the theme, the themes initially, and then we shape it from there. It's almost like that doing that again when you write a cue. And so it's a very interesting process of when you have great experiences, having that happen, having them reshape your music. It should not be a bad experience. It
mm,
should, but I was never expecting it. But now from now on, I do expect that a little bit.
right. Yeah,
I
right.
will I will better communicate that, "Hey, if you want to change something about a cue, come to me and I will gladly do it." You
Right.
know?
Right.
Producer on a movie didn't like high violin parts, melodic stuff, and I had a lot of that cool stuff, and I spent a lot of time on making the violin part cool. And they
Uh-huh.
didn't like I didn't know till much later that they didn't like that. And I was like, "Well," because the director did. Anyways, so I was like, "Well, come to me next and I'll take that
Right.
out."
Right,
I'm
right.
like I'm not that attached to my music.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Because oftentimes, and this happens a lot, more so, is that it's not about the cue that you've written, it's about a layer or a few layers in that cue that you've written.
Mm,
And to me, if my main theme is there, but we take out a bongo part, just say, I don't care. I'm not emotionally attached to that bongo part. I've got my theme there, you know?
right.
So
Right,
come to
right.
me, and that's where working with different directors it's a different job every time.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you have to work with somebody several times to learn that. So if you keep on working with new directors, there's never a
Yeah, yeah.
consistency.
Yeah. Well, I no, I like that what you're saying, and I expect going back to you mentioned it before about in moments where something's just not working,
Mhm.
that the less musically versatile people might think it's the writing that's the problem, and not just the instrumentation or the arrangement or the layers like you're talking about. I think that's
Mhm.
it's really good lesson, I think, is to not just throw it out or not just to
Yeah.
be convinced that it's the wrong composition, but just, to yeah, take this down, remove this, try different combinations because there are so many layers involved
A-
first
a-
before it
uh-huh.
becomes, maybe it's actually the melody that's not working.
And invite I think the mistake I made on that film that I was talking about where they didn't like the higher violins, I was so pressed for time to finish within budget and within the timeline that I was like, "I don't need them to come over. I don't need them to come over." And I was like, and that was like, and then 6 months later, I'm still worried about the cues not being what I wrote
Mm,
because and what I mean by that is you have to bring them in physically. Even if you're working remote, you have to bring them in physically and maybe even point to each layer. I did have that happen years ago on a feature where there were 4 producers, one of them being the director, and all 4 producers wanted to have an opinion. And then I waited for 2 months without hearing anything until the director was like, "Oh, I'm gonna come over and we're gonna work on this stuff." And we're like, "Great." And that session was more productive than the entire film up
mm,
into that working on the score to that entire film because we sat down. And I pointed to the layers in my session, and he was like, "Oh, I don't like that sound." I was like, "Okay, now we're getting somewhere."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, actually, I want you to bring in that sound a measure early because when she puts the thing on the counter, I want that sound to hear." I was like, "Okay." You know,
Mm,
like if I were to be, no, this is my composition, I don't want that sound earlier, it would be ridiculous. So you can
right.
be so productive having somebody really sit with you. Now, you have to get to the point in which you've already written the music
Mhm.
to get to there because you're shaping at that point. You're not
Mhm.
writing, you're not creating, you're shaping.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting, like,
Mhm,
um, if the composer and the work of putting it together is completely separate from the director or the producer,
mhm.
they don't know the mechanics of it, they can't
Yep.
see the pieces,
Yeah.
and all they get is just hearing it. So I think, yeah, having them have
Mhm.
a more visual, tactile relationship, getting in there with you, getting their hands dirty on the
Yeah.
actual material, that's great
It,
advice
it's
for everybody.
it's necessary, and again, maybe not for longtime filmmakers,
Mm,
but like somebody who's already on their first or second feature, absolutely.
mm,
Because like just because it's an oral medium doesn't mean like you shouldn't shy away from getting it done however you need to get it done.
yeah.
If that means them looking at your session.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
obviously playing for them. Oh, this is this, this is this. And just get really specific because yeah, you could throw out a cue really easily based upon one sound not working.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
And that was the you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater at that point, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's yeah. I feel like I
Um,
looked up the history of that saying and it's still gross to me, but yes.
it's a very gross thing.
Uh,
Curious about problems that filmmakers have in the edit that they hope that you can solve,
oh, yeah, okay.
and maybe if you have an example of that.
The only thing I can speak to is, and I've noticed this on movies that I've seen, is that you can tell. I'll talk about a very recent example. I watched the first two episodes of the Alien show on Hulu, and not spoiler alert for the first two episodes, but there was a scene in which this woman discovers that this android is actually wait no the young girl is
Yeah,
actually an android version of this guy's sister who passed away.
right.
And I remember seeing the scene where he finally realizes it's really her. And the music is just whoa, whoa. And I realized it's because although a great show, story-wise, I don't think they were there for that reveal.
Mm,
I don't know if that scene showed acting wise showed it, but they were really trying to sell it with the music. And so now that show is pretty fantastic overall. So we're nitpicking here, but I'm using
yeah,
it as an example of some of them some of the made for TV movies I feel like are wall to wall music because things just aren't there, so they need to pump it up. Like you
mhm,
need the energy needs to be there, so we need more music. And like
yep,
I will argue day and night for less music.
mm,
However, I understand if you don't think it's working, the scene wise, I can see that desperation of, well, let's have the music solve it.
mhm,
I've never on many projects I've worked on, I've never run into that or I had to fix it.
okay,
That's why I'm mentioning other examples of where I've noticed.
yeah,
And I feel like the answer is, well, if it's not working, then put music there. And it's like, well, no, that's not,
yeah,
but
right,
I don't want your film to be ruined. I don't want this scene to be ruined if like if I'm putting a piano in there helps you, you know?
sure,
But at a certain point, you're spoon feeding the audience that, hey, the acting isn't work. The rest of the filmmaking isn't working. Your music is covering it up.
yeah. Yeah, no, it seems like a last resort for anybody. No one wants to do that if that's that's the burden of the composer and the
Mhm.
editor, right? Because everything ends with them.
Yeah.
You're the last line of defense to getting the story across, and you can only do so much before it becomes obvious, like you're saying, like in another example where it's like, well, like that seems a little too much. It we're
Yeah,
probably
that's
patching
weird.
a hole there.
Yeah, I was like, "That's weird." I was like, why is the music bothering me?" "Oh, it's bothering me because it hasn't been earned."
Mhm. Mhm.
Now I will say something that's a little masochistic. Um, Sometimes you compose for a scene and then they re-edit the scene,
Mm.
and I can see that being very frustrating, and sometimes it is, but I feel like I had one scene where they just cut a couple shots, and I had to make this massive transition from one key to another.
Mm.
And actually, this was in the breakdown that I just posted on TikTok to Somewhere Slow, the feature from 2013, I think.
Mhm.
And so I pretty much, you can make any music key change, any music instrument change if there's enough time. But
Right.
the time between was cut.
Right. Right.
So I had to figure out musically how to make that transition. And I think my music is more interesting now based upon the fact that I had to figure out a smarter way to make that
Mhm.
music transition. So I
Mm.
want to say I kind of enjoy it when they cut up a scene because then I'm like, maybe not every scene, but maybe a couple scenes because then I'm like, okay, cool. I have to be creative. I have to think outside of my own structure and figure out how
Mhm.
to make it work better with the scene.
Mm. Yeah, it's a creative exercise.
Creative, yeah.
Okay, to be a composer,
Mhm.
that gets I suppose it makes sense. If you need jobs, you need to be available to as many jobs as possible, and to be available or to be able to do a all those jobs, you need quite a bit of range in your genres, in your styles, your instruments. What can you maybe walk us through, like, how that was for you? Like, was there once you got in, like horror music, for
Mhm.
example, that doesn't really come out of being in a band, right? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff there that you would have to have learned and adapted to. So can you describe, like, again, and I guess for up and coming composers, like how they might go about, like, okay, I love music, I love movies, I want to be a composer, but I can't do all 100 genres.
Mhm.
How do you start with that, or how do you go about that?
Well, I'll start with the simple answer is I'm not there yet, meaning like I
Mhm,
don't know yet.
mhm,
I'm still in a position right now where I have done more horror than anything else, but I still haven't been pigeonholed yet. And
mhm,
I kind of want to be pigeonholed in a certain way because because no matter how much we fight it, like consistent branding is key.
mm,
And so I personally know that I can write any genre. That never translates into everybody knowing that you can write every genre.
mm,
I got rejected from a film because they were looking for a specific sound and we want to use your talent, your style at another time. And I'm like, well, I want the job though. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah,
like, what is this sound you're talking about? I can do anything, but I guess you don't. And so I guess what I'm saying is, uh, being pigeonholed into one niche is probably better from a working standpoint,
mm,
because it's like, oh, I need this. I'm doing a horror. Call the horror guy. Um, but the problem is, I like writing all genres.
mm,
I
yeah,
like the challenge. I'm doing music for a library now, and they use these pieces and a couple reality television shows, and it's ambient. And I'm so rhythmic that I can't not have a rhythm in something. And so I love writing for this library because it's a challenge for me to write nothing. And that's being insulting to ambient music, but it's like, how do you write something that has no real structure but is also interesting?
right.
So the short answer is I don't know because I'm not there yet. I haven't been in one category or another. And I enjoy that, but I think from a selling me standpoint, it's not as easy to sell
Mhm,
me.
mhm,
Mm, thankfully a lot of the filmmakers that I know want to work with me anyway and kind of see my potential in every genre. So yeah, there is no advice other than being consistent in a genre is not the worst thing in the world,
Right. Right.
especially if
Mhm.
you want to be a marketable composer.
That's good. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. Maybe it's make sure you or do your best to aim yourself in that genre direction, right?
Hmm.
Make sure if you're gonna get pigeonholed or tap, like you're gonna find your niche, make sure it's the one that's most interesting to you in the long term because you might be in there for
Oh wow. Yeah.
a while.
And I'll be honest, I love writing depressing music. I like morose stuff, and
Yeah.
that's what I wrote in high school at my piano. I mean, do you think I was a teenager coming home and writing happy music? Hell no. No, it was all depressing, and I loved it, and I got
Mm,
into my own frustrations, and so, um, I did a show called Dick Bunny, which, I don't know if you saw any breakdowns of that. It's
mm,
this 6-episode series, still trying to sell it, but it's a comedy, and it was so fun to write for that because it wasn't dark comedy in the way we think of dark comedies, like, like, I don't know, what that scene in Pulp Fiction where, what's his name gets shot in the head in the back, It's like
mhm,
it's not dark in that sense. It's dark and like it's about a mom. It's a very fantastic story about a mom figuring out how to be a new parent, and she kind of goes a little crazy and conjures up this bunny from her childhood who turns out to be a sassy guy in a bunny ears helping
mhm,
her raise her kids. And so it's kind of making fun of new parent culture and making parents feel guilty about doing the most basic thing, and that's not going to
right,
harm your kid. Anyways, it's funny. It's like that's dark. And so I can tap into that, but the music can't be, it's almost the darker, the happier the music is, the darker it is.
uh-huh, right,
And so how do I tap into my strength of writing somber music, but turn it into a comedy? And maybe that's an example of my style is maybe people can sense that undertone of unhappiness in a happy song.
mm, mhm.
Maybe I should just repeat that over and over again so that my branding cuts through.
Is there a style, a genre that you haven't worked in that you really would like to?
Funny enough, I'm an action movie fan,
Mm,
and I've only really worked on one semi-action series. I made my own action short film. Everyone should just direct their own film. I do
mm,
not want to be a director. I mean, if
mm,
somebody called me up and said, Barry, why don't you direct the next Marvel movie? I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Yeah. Because that's how,
yeah,
I don't know. Anyways,
just learn.
back to the point. The point is, I'm surprised. Well, I'm not surprised I haven't done more action. I think the issue is a lot of indie filmmakers at my level don't make action movies,
Right,
and so, and I made a YouTube video about this where I actually wrote a piece for an action scene and I listened to it a year or two later and I was like, oh, that's not good enough.
uh-huh,
And so I filmed my whole self remaking that cue and being like, oh, I should have added this. I should have added this. And it was fun for me to add on more layers and
mm,
figure out what wasn't working. So the short answer is I would love to work on indie action films because I say indie action films because if you have like the big budget action films don't seem that interesting musically to me
mm,
because they don't really take the time to tap in. And that's not true of all, but they don't take the time to tap into character.
yeah,
And I feel like an indie action film would have almost less action. Like a terrible example is the movie Drive. And the reason I say it's terrible is because the music in that was more song based, but
mm,
I loved how deep it was and dark it was,
yeah,
and how much time it took. Like that's a character piece more than an action movie, and maybe that's
right,
what I like about it.
yeah,
So yeah, an action movie, but an indie action movie. I'd like to work on more of those.
okay. Yeah, that would be kind of rare to find it, just from a budget perspective, that's probably why it's not happening nearly as often.
Well, the short film that I directed, I think is pretty good. By the way, it's a Transformers fan fiction film
Okay.
where I actually built a puppet an 18-inch puppet that we used and filmed on green screen with puppeteers.
Mm,
Really fun. Such a blow to the ego when I submitted it to film festivals and it just got rejected after rejection after rejection. And it's not bad. And actually, I was told that the acting in it is far better than a lot of indie films out there. I, but the reason I'm mentioning it is because I talked to a programmer at a film festival and she was like, "Yeah, it's a great movie. We don't really get action movies, so we can't put it anywhere."
Mm.
And so the indie action film world is almost missing, you know?
Yeah.
There's horror, you got your horror block, you got your drama block, you got your comedy block, but
Yeah.
all the only action movie oriented festivals I found were so small and independent that it was like,
Mhm.
I don't know. And I'm
Yeah,
not trying to diss
well,
anything. I'm just trying to say it was lacking. It wasn't there.
right.
And then the good festivals don't have an action block, you know?
Mm. Yeah, no, I hadn't thought of that, but that makes sense, like, you don't really see that at that at that level in those venues. Well, I like what you I wanna go back to you said something about, everyone should direct a movie.
Mhm.
It's fantastic advice because y I think going back even further to our conversation about how composers and directors work together,
Mhm.
they need a common language,
Yep.
and if you don't as much as they might not know your musical language, you might not know their directing language, or you might not know what what they've been through in their process to get to that point so that you can put yourself in their shoes, and then suddenly you have something, some frame of reference.
Yeah, imagine going through, sometimes 5, 6 weeks, maybe if you're big budget on 7 or 8 months, 12, 16-hour days, coming back into the editing room and the composer fighting you on what you want, you know? Like, that wasn't my short but I can imagine, like, the physical
Mhm.
commitment you made to your film, and you wanna come and the composer's like, "I only wanna use, I don't know, the sitar," and you're like, "But that's not what my film is." Like, I don't and I don't think any composer really is fighting that hard for something so obscure if it doesn't work. But yeah, that did I
Yeah,
learn that in that sense? Well, maybe not, but, like, I can on hindsight, I'm like, "Oh, I can see where, physically making a film is difficult,
yeah,
and mentally it's difficult." So don't know that the director's already been through it.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, it might not even be, a very tangible experience to have, but, like, just to know where they are mentally, just
Mhm.
in general,
Yep.
and what they need from you, and how you can kind of facilitate them at that last, the last right before the finish line is you,
Yep.
and to be able to carry them through and just kinda know where they are mentally, which is, that form of communication of really listening to someone is not just what they're saying or what they mean underneath it, and or where they're coming from.
Yeah, and that's another reason to start talking about the music early on, because maybe don't get to the point where your film is finished and you're cutting it and then you're thinking about music.
Yeah, right.
Of course, you have to be careful because anything musically you write before the film is edited could change 180 degrees.
Yeah.
But, start talking about it.
Mhm.
I mean, I did write a few pieces based upon seeing some raw footage, and I wrote 4 pieces, and the director loved one of them, and that turned into the score, so I got lucky, of that theme at least. But, that's a great example. But yeah, I think talking about the music early on is probably best.
Right. Yeah. Get in front of it. Any advice for up and coming composers, schooling, education, business, being in business for yourself, anything that you and maybe you could answer it like going back to yourself. You're in the DeLorean, you go back
Mhm.
to how, whenever you started, what are you going to tell yourself on how to get started in this area?
Um, so I went to school for music recording, and I not music composition, and I think that was the best choice in terms of that I could always create my own music from scratch.
Mm,
Because I knew how to record, I knew virtual instruments and everything. However, I do wish I did supplemental courses in music composition, and that's not just to learn the intricacies of composition because I've always been able to compose. And it's funny, I will take a course in composition just to like prove to myself that I actually do know what I'm doing, you know? But every once in a while that doubt creeps in of like, well, you haven't really gone to school for composition, but that never stopped me from doing it. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because you have to make a choice. I personally think that based upon what I'm reading on the internet these days, threads in particular, uh, there are people so stuck in weird opinions about music recording because they learn from YouTube videos. And
Mm,
YouTube is a great resource, but it should definitely not be your only resource
uh-huh.
of learning something. It's good to be like, oh, I need to learn about this little facet that I maybe didn't pick up in school. So don't ignore schooling.
Mm,
Don't think you have to get a degree.
mm,
You just have to learn, but learning the skill in a class is way better than learning it on YouTube.
mm,
Um, and then on top of that, you're actually physically meeting people.
right.
Um, I'm a little annoyed at saying this, but I'm like, so many film composers come out of USC that I probably should have gone to USC. You know what I mean? Like it's so impressive. It makes sense. You're in Los Angeles. USC
Uh-huh.
is here. I
Mhm.
went to Emerson, and Emerson has a lot of people out here. Emerson College has a ton of people out here. So it's funny. I don't really have one bit of advice other than don't ignore school.
Okay.
Don't think that you have to, again, you don't have to get a degree or you don't have, but you should take physical, actual classes. And another reason I'm mentioning that is to not worry about the degree is I know a lot of classical musicians who are so burned by the structure of classical music training that they're afraid to compose. That, they hear people that have composing students that the students are like, oh, when can I start composing? And you're like, do it now. You
Yeah.
know,
Right.
I want people to be educated in the craft, but don't assume that you have to know everything to start doing it.
Mm,
Because the last thing you want to do is crush your own creativity and crush your own drive.
yeah.
So thinking I got to go through 10 years of school before I start, no, 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 no. Just,
Yeah.
do you have an idea? Start writing that idea. Oh,
Yeah.
you have a filmmaker friend that needs music for a film. They're making their first. See if you can write music for it.
Uh-huh.
Because the real world examples are going to be far better than anything else. But you need the foundation of some kind of class.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it makes sense. You don't necessarily need to go to the biggest or best
No.
school. You don't need years and years or a diploma or a master's or anything like that, but some sort of foundation.
Some sort of foundation
Yeah.
because the internet is terrible in a lot of ways. And misinformation is dangerous politically, but misinformation is bad technically, people saying things like, "Oh, you need this plugin, otherwise you can't do anything."
Mm.
I had a director I just talked to, and he was like, "Oh, I need this sound plugin to make it sound good, and then we're done. Then we're done with sound, right?" It was like, "No, no, no. You need to have a mixer." Like, who told you that? you know. And again, that's where patience comes in for filmmakers because they were told one thing.
Yeah.
These days, it's all about, well, AI can do this and that, and it's like, well, no, it can't. you know,
Yeah.
the overlords have been sold on AI and they've been told that you can do this, but the craft. So be careful about technical misinformation.
Right, right. Well, Barry, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Um, I learned a lot, and I'm really thankful for that. But people can find you on your website.
Everything is so I emphasize the J in my name
Mm,
because I still get fan mail for Blake Neely
okay.
and I'm not Blake Neely, so I'm Barry J Neely. So the J is very important. It's
With a
also
J.
all my handles. So yeah, my website is barryjneely.com, TikTok, Instagram, Barry J Neely.
Great,
You'll find me everywhere. Yeah.
great. Awesome. Thank you, Barry.
Yeah, you're
We'll
welcome.
talk
Good talking
soon.
to you.
Yeah. See ya.